made a video a little while back about red flags to look at when you're buying a home in North Carolina. That talked mostly about homes and things to look out for. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the contract actually in North Carolina. You know, being one of the very few caveat emptor states or buyer beware states where certain protections are not afforded into our contract, I think it's important just for a quick overview on some of these contract specifics and what that could mean in a real estate transaction for you. And obviously, as your agent, we're going to go through these in detail in the middle of a transaction, but I just found a good way to reduce stress is for you having information ahead of time so you kind of know what's coming up next, know a little bit more about what you're kind of getting into before you just jump headlong. Because, you know, the fun part of buying a house is out there looking and showing homes and stuff like that, but the real work for me begins once we're under contract. So if you just have a basic familiarity with these terms and with, you know, what caveat emptor or buyer beware means in regard to North Carolina and Winston-Salem real estate, you're just going to feel a little bit more at ease, I think. And if you need help buying real estate, my contact information is on the screen or in the description below as well. And it's gonna be interesting to see how many people watch this video because, you know, it might not be the most exciting topic, but some people love to research more. And if you're in here on YouTube watching this, maybe you're a little bit more into research. But either way, useful information, you're gonna have to deal with it if you're gonna buy real estate in Winston-Salem or North Carolina for that matter. So the first thing is just talking about what due diligence is and what the due diligence period is. Just a quick reminder on that. That's a negotiated time for a negotiated amount of money for you to do all your pre-purchase items, your inspection, surveys, financing, appraisal, all those different things, right? During this due diligence time period, the buyer can walk away from the transaction for any reason, no reason at all. It doesn't matter. They have control of that property during that time. The most common things we're going to do during this time is, you know, inspections, appraisals, things like that to make sure the house is what you thought it was when you put the offer on the house and that your financing, if you're using financing, is in order. Now, onto the property itself, the biggest things that are addressed in the contract when it comes to due diligence and buyer beware or caveat emptor is that the first thing, probably most common, is the overall condition of the property. It's important to know that you're going to have property disclosures where the seller in most cases will fill this out and give to their, you know, their best recollection information about the property, systems, any problems, things like that. And if a seller or a listing agent were to mislead or obviously hide something like that, that in those disclosures or not disclose something that they knew about, you'll be entitled to your due diligence fee. Very, very rare occurrence, but that is something to be aware of. So we can usually trust but verify what we find in these disclosures. But in Winston-Salem, well, technically North Carolina, because of the North Carolina purchase contract that we're using, all real estate is sold as is. This is actually addressed very plainly on page 6 of the contract. Now remember, what you find during your due diligence period, your inspections and things like that, we can negotiate during that time. We can ask for repairs, credits, things like that. So it doesn't mean you can't ask for repairs and different things like that, but that is not what the contract is contingent upon. That's important to know. And it's also addressed right in the contract that, you know, the sellers might negotiate for repairs or credits or improvements to the property, but they're not obligated to do so. Good news on that is, of course, that is what it says in the contract. The good news is 98% of the time we can usually come to some kind of agreement to make both parties happy when it's a legitimate situation that you didn't know about, the sellers didn't know about, and everybody wants to kind of keep a transaction going. So it's not to say like, take it or leave it, this is how it is. That's really, really rare that happens. Yes, there are some jerks out there. In the last few years, though, I've run across less than a handful of them. 2 or 3 times in well over 100 transactions, we see somebody just put their foot down. No, take it or leave it. This is how it is. Also, in rare circumstances, we can make a request for a repair to be done. If we see something egregious that we know you want to have fixed, we can make that part of an offer with an addendum. It is pretty rare that is done, but we do them once in a while where if we see, hey, there is this or that needs to be repaired, our offer is contingent on that, and we just fill out a separate addendum to make that part of the contract. But just know the regular real estate contract is not subject to any condition of the house. The next thing to talk about on the buyer beware aspect of our contracts in North Carolina and Winston-Salem is the financing and appraisal portion. There's no contract that is subject to you getting your financing or subject to the property appraising for what you're purchasing it for. This is much less common now where appraisals are way out of whack. We still see them come in off value once in a while, but nothing like we did a few years ago when prices were going through the roof. That's why it's important before we make an offer, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at comparables, we're going to see exactly what's going on in this neighborhood for similar types of homes, price per square foot, you know, and things like that, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as what we're offering, so that way we can just put our best foot forward and knowing that the property should appraise based on what we're seeing. But remember, our offer is not contingent contingent on that. On the financing piece, that's why it's really important to have a good team and a lender in place that you trust. I had a client, this was a couple years ago, that really insisted on going with one of these big box lenders. They got this pre-approval done. I gave them a call. They said, oh yeah, they're good to go. They sent in check stubs and all these things like that. Well, long story short is the buyer's income on their tax forms was not what it was on the check stubs. Check stubs, yes, they made $80,000 a year. That was what the pre-approval was based on. But when you look at the tax forms, they did a lot of tax deductions for mileage and other things like that. So their taxable income was much, much lower. They could not afford for the house that they wanted to buy, and they ended up losing their due diligence fee because they had to walk away because their financing would not go through. It is important really to have, during this due diligence time frame, we want to make sure your financing and everything is locked in, but the more of that you can do up front to make that less scary, the smoother things tend to go. So if you have a lender, I have ones that I recommend, but you can choose whoever you want, but one that will get you through, through underwriting, where you get in not only check stubs, but tax returns and all those items, will put you on a much, much smoother path. Next thing is our contracts here can't be contingent on you selling your house. So if you have a house that's for sale and you need those funds from that house to buy the house here, we can't make it contingent on that offer. What we have to try to do is make our due diligence date match that time frame. So say your house is, in our offer, you're going to close on your house that you're selling in 20 days. We want to make sure our due diligence time period ends in about 25 days. So you have your closing on your house, you get the funds, you can use that to move on to the next one. We just have to space it a little bit different, but just know we can't do contingent on selling a house in North Carolina. And then you have all your other odds and end pieces, right? Our contingencies or buyer beware aspects here as well. Survey, insurance, zoning, all those different things like that. Again, we're going to go through all these in detail as we move through the purchase process, but just know, if you have any questions on any of these things, we should really look a little bit further before putting in an offer as much as we can. If we need to call the county to see if permits were pulled for, a remodeling project, or if it's somewhere where we know that the Beltway is going to come in a few years, how close is it going to be? We need to check on the zoning or where this project is going to be built here. We need to check on these things as much as we can before the offer, but definitely during our due diligence period. So if something is not at what we think it is, that we can adjust for either, appropriate price reductions, credits, repairs, or ultimately, if not, none of those are satisfied, we have to terminate the transaction. And if you need help buying or selling real estate anywhere in Winston-Salem or the surrounding area, you can reach out to me directly at jeff@govalentino.com. Thanks.